Welcome to the Immigration.ca live stream series. My name is Andrea and I'm here with immigration lawyer and recruitment professional Colin Singer. Colin is managed partner of Immigration.ca as well as managing partner of Global Recruiters of Montreal. So today we're going to be discussing, well, before we get started, just to cover the CRS scores, Colin, there was a draw yesterday actually. So the CRS scores actually are at an all-time low. So the CRS score was 423 and this was on April 12th. So in the past 3 weeks, we've actually seen 3 draws. So before that, on April 5th, the CRS score was 431. And before that, 2 weeks before, on March 24th, the CRS score was 441. So we're seeing this trend of the CRS scores going down. So that ties in nicely with our topic of discussion, and that is a quarterly review of 2017. So we're going to see what has been happening in Express Entry for the first quarter this year. So Colin, lower CRS scores and more invitations.
Well, that has been the trend, and it's consistent with what took place in the first 3 months. It's interesting to look at what's happened in the first 3 months in comparison to each of the past 2 years. So if we look at the first 6 months of 2017, the number of invitations has really far exceeded the numbers from the previous years. We had over 24,000 in the first 3 years of 2017 invitations issued. For each draw, that works out to, in the first 7 draws of this year that end by the end of March, we're averaging about 4,100 invitations per draw. This is significantly higher than what happened in 2016, when for the same period we had about 9,500 invitations over 7 draws, and that worked out to about 1,350 invitations per draw for the same period. And in 2016, the numbers of draws for that period, there were only 6 draws in 2015. That was the first year when Express Entry first came into operation. There were about 6,850 invitations issued for the 3-month period, and that worked out to about 1,140 invitations per draw. So the growth and the increase in the number of invitations per draw is obviously quite striking and quite interesting. What's also interesting, of course, is the CRS scores for each of those years. The CRS score for the draws that took place this year, it's averaging about 449. Bearing in mind what's happened in the last 3 weeks, we're down to 423. So there's an acceleration of CRS score declines, although compared to previous years, the CRS score on average was 461. And the first year, which is really not a fair comparison, right. It was only 696. Shouldn't say only, it was so high. And it's not fair to really try to compare CRS scores from year to year because really the system has really evolved, and the way they calculate points now is quite different, of course, than when it first started. But
I mean, what are the reasons? So, I mean, okay, so as you mentioned, there's been an increase in the invitations to apply. What are the reasons for this?
Well, there's 4 main reasons that we can look to that explain why is there such a dramatic increase, over 24,000 invitations first 3 months of this year compared to previous years. Well, look, the numbers of invitations they need to reach, we've said this before, the economic category is going to, on the annual immigration levels, Canada is planning to bring in 77,000. That's the high end. They're looking to achieve around 72,700, but they always have a high a target level and a low. But if we look at the high level, which for many practitioners we think the government is probably going to reach more on the high side. So they need to attract a lot of candidates. We've said this before, yes. Where they've got to reach high in order to get close to the numbers that they're looking to achieve. So bringing in 77,000 on the high side under economic class. And it's also interesting because the government now has data that they didn't have before.
Right.
3 years of data, which there's a linkage between how many invitations they need to issue and how many candidates actually file an application. So there is a drop-off factor. The government hasn't shared the current year. They haven't given us the formal results of what took place in 2016. But indications are that the drop-off factor, meaning the number of people who don't perfect their applications after receiving an invitation, you have 90 days. So it's alarming that almost 40% informally, we don't have the number yet, but we're pretty confident it's quite close to 40% who don't submit an application. It means either they're not ready to go to Canada, they don't have the full documentation on hand, and perhaps other reasons. That's a second reason. And the third reason is that the government needs to carefully allocate, and they need to have people landing in this year, which means the second quarter is very important, and perhaps the last quarter will be important as well, because we saw an increase in 2015 and 2016. The last few draws of each year will see quite an increase. So each quarter represents an important period in terms of how the flow of candidates will come. Okay. So they have a good understanding now, and that's the third reason, is they have a good understanding and they need to ramp up in the beginning of the year in order to have people ready coming to Canada in this current year. Okay. So it's a function of how many people they hope to have coming to Canada. And of course, there's a fourth reason, and that is we don't have a backlog of applicants in the system from the old system as much as it used to be, and that actually was the reason they brought in Express Entry, was to be able to manage the volume of applications. So now it's a question that the old system is completely has been culled, and the applications have been processed through, and now the numbers coming to Canada entirely will come from the Express Entry system. Okay. So that now gives you gives us a feel as to why the numbers will continue to be pretty high.
Okay, so we've seen an increase in the invitations to apply for Express Entry go up significantly. The decrease in the CRS score, however, has been more gradual. And what are the reasons for that?
It has been more gradual, although it's if we look at the past 3 weeks, going from 440 now to 423. But okay. If we look at the first 3 months compared to previous years, the decline in CRS scores are quite healthy, but obviously not as dramatic as the number of invitations that have grown over each of the past 3 years. Now, obviously, there's reasons that relate to the caliber of candidates. So candidates are becoming aware of how to increase their CRS score. The caliber of candidates is obviously growing to the point where there's a large number of candidates in the mid 400s and low 400s who are now becoming aware of what they need to attain to receive an invitation. So you've got a good quality of candidates. But I think what also has partly limited the dramatic decline, although it's healthy in the CRS score, it is quite interesting, but there's been a reorientation of how they allocate points, primarily moving 600 points away from an LMIA and restricting, giving 600 only to provincial nominee candidates. That really had a dramatic effect on the overall alignment of the number of points candidates will get. We've also had the November changes saw points being given to people who are studying in Canada. So as candidates are submitting their applications, and as the pool of candidates who've studied in Canada, we'll see the scores declining in a sense, but not as rapidly as. So things are going to stabilize in the low 400s, and they might even move up a bit, or might come down a bit. But I think we're starting to get closer to a realistic, let's say, area of CRS scores, and that's going to certainly solidify even more as we move forward in time. Again, having the data, having a large pool of candidates, an increasing number of candidates who've studied in Canada or who work in Canada and are entitled to 50 points for a work permit. So all of these factors together will give rise to monumental shifts, unlikely in the CRS score, but gradual moving up and down as the pool fills with candidates of varying backgrounds.
Okay. So, I mean, with that being said, every point counts, every bit counts. So, I mean, it's very important to look at your profile and see how you can actually increase your CRS score, because there are ways. We did a video on September 22nd of last year on how to increase your CRS score. And we also did another video on March 27th, and that was how to find a job in Canada. So, I mean, if you do find a job in Canada, that does get you the 50 extra points.
Well, that's it. You know, people who are in the 350 plus range, anyone who's in the 350 plus range, really, this is an opportune time for you, because with a job in hand, if you are successful in finding a Canadian employer, you're obviously really getting close to the thresholds of scores that are giving rise to an invitation to apply. Right. So anyone who's in the 350 plus range, now's a time for you to be seriously considering a project to Canada under the express entry system. Right. Obviously, you're a bit shy of the current 423. We think the future looks good. We'll cover that in a few moments. But obviously, if you're in the 350 plus range, working with a firm such as ours, where we're offering help and really substantive assistance in finding work. But if you check our Facebook video carousel, yes, you'll see these really good videos that we've done. The one that we recently completed, which was really one of our more popular ones, is how to find a job in Canada. That's really going to give you some insight on what you need to do to find a job. And of course, how to boost your CRS score, which, as you highlight, becomes vital. How do you increase by 5 points, for example? Because now every segment of points is going to make a difference. If you're in the express entry pool, the difference between obviously the previous one at 431 going down to 427, what does it take to move your score up by 4 or 5 points? If you watch our video that we did on September 22nd, that's going to give you some good positive insight into what you need to try to do.
Okay. So, I mean, Colin, what can we expect going forward into the second quarter of 2017?
Well, indications are we're already seeing that for the first couple of weeks in April. We expect to see, again, looking at all the numbers, probably another 6 or 7 draws in the next quarter. Invitation numbers will surely be in, high 3,000s, perhaps 4,000 at some point. CRS scores look, we can't predict the future, because what we don't know is how many candidates will be coming forward into the pool. Week by week, candidates are entered. Again, 12 months is how long a profile can remain in the pool. It gets removed automatically. But obviously, we're expecting scores to stay healthy, surely under 450, realistically in the low 400s. At some point this year, it wouldn't surprise us if we start seeing CRS scores in the 390s, 380s. Again, if you're a candidate that has a CRS score in the 350 range, and what we'll do on our next live stream is break down what it takes to get 350. What does it take to get 400 and 425? What are the profiles of candidates? That's going to be on our next live stream, really driving down in the numbers. But what we can expect to see for the next quarter, another 6 to 7 draws, scores in the low 400s. And really, there's another major change that's going to be taking place on June 6th. Important changes that are going to deal with how points are calculated and surely how points are awarded. They're going to obviously, which they haven't done before, which will affect some candidates, giving points for siblings, yes. Points for Francophone, French as a second language, those that have reasonably advanced French language skills will benefit from these changes coming in on June 6th. I think what we often try to do is relate the immigration policies with the Canadian job market. Obviously, that is why we have a robust immigration program. And if you look at what's been taking place in the economy over the past 3 months, readers will be able to read some of our material under Immigration News section. You'll see that the latest job numbers point to an unemployment rate, a falling unemployment rate under 7%. We're at 6.7%. There were, in the first quarter, 83,000 jobs that were created, that were added to the economy. And from the previous 12-month March, ending March 2017, going back 12 months, the economy created 276,000 jobs. So we're seeing it's been a slow improvement in the economy. There are other metrics that are interesting that point to a curing economy. You also have the bank rate, which was held steady. They were talking about cutting the rate because there was talk in the end of 2016 and in the first 2 months of 2017, there was discussion that they might consider a rate cut to stimulate the economy further. But the Bank of Canada has put a brake on any discussion of cutting the rates. They're holding the rate steady, which means, obviously, a heating economy, good prospects for employment. So all said and done, it seems to be good opportunities in the Canadian immigration sphere for candidates to come forward. Why don't we share with them what we can do for people?
Okay, well, if you're interested in coming to Canada, please go to our website, immigration.ca, and complete our free online evaluation form. And we'll get back to you with regards to your options. I mean, we'll assist you with your immigration as well as your employment search assistance as well. If you're interested in the topic that we discussed today as well, please go to the news section of our website where you can actually read through what we discussed, and also we have other news articles as well. And if you want to stay up to date, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. On our social media, we'll keep you up to date with the latest developments in Canadian immigration news. Well, Colin, that concludes our topic for today.
That concludes our topic. Our next planned event will probably be in 2 weeks' time. What we're going to try to cover at that time, look out for what the various profiles require and what points you get. So we're going to start looking into what is it a profile comprise of and what it takes to reach 400 points, what kinds of candidates will generally receive points in the 400 range. So that'll be our next topic. Watch out for that. Thanks very much for joining us today. And
great. Well, we'll see you in the next live stream.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to the Immigration.ca live stream series. My name is Andrea and I'm here with immigration lawyer Colin Singer. Colin is managing partner of immigration.ca in Canada. Today we're going to start off by discussing some recent developments in Canadian immigration news, followed by some questions that we've received from you. As always, we love hearing from you, so please do feel free to communicate with us in the comments below. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're going to be speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes with regards to the latest developments in the immigration news. And if you have any friends that you find might be interested in this live stream, please do feel free to share it with them. Well, Colin, should we get started?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Well, there's been some very interesting developments that have taken place in the industry in the last week. Perhaps one of the interesting topics that came to our mind was that the levels of immigration to Canada were perhaps the highest in close to 100 years,
Exactly.
a little bit more than 100 years. The Canadian government admitted to Canada 320,000 immigrants during the period June 1st, 2015 and June 30th, 2016. It represented a 33% increase from the previous year, when in 2014-15 there were only 240,000 immigrants admitted. It was the lowest at that time in a 15-year period. The most recent numbers show a very big increase. People are definitely remarking at how this particular government has brought in so many people. But of course there's a caveat. It comes on the heels of a really low number the previous years. And it perhaps signals that this particular government, which came in on a mandate based on immigration, that they're going to bring in a healthy number of managed immigration in the next few years. And our population, interestingly enough, increased to over 36 million. A large percentage of the new population increase, which was 400 and some thousand people added to the population, is accounted by this very healthy number, this record number of immigrants. Why is that?
I mean, well, basically, Canada is an aging population, so we do need immigration for economic growth. So therefore, I mean, it's essential that we do have newcomers to Canada to assist us in reaching this goal.
And the difficulty that our policymakers are facing is that the over age 65 now comprises a larger portion than what we call the younger age, under age 15. This is, it happened for the first time last summer, but it's a trend that's going to continue. Our net labor market growth is now predominantly based on a healthy number of immigration. Senior citizens are growing. And so this particular government is looking to bring in more immigrants, but managed.
Exactly, and they plan on increasing immigration levels over the next 3 years, but obviously managed. I mean, bringing in skilled workers, for example. So, I mean, the target, they set high targets, and we seem to be on target.
And so for 2016, what we've already covered in the past in our writings, and today's topic is one in which you can find more details on our website under Immigration News, September 2016. But what's interesting is that it comes on the heels of an interesting article that immigration has traditionally been criticized for driving down wages.
Yes.
This was an American initiative that came out through the writings of a very well-known economist in the U.S. And he has written time and again that immigration drives down wages. And it's just not true, according to many, and according to a very interesting study, and this is our second piece today, in which we call Immigration Myths Busted. in a comprehensive new report. And this report is U.S.-based, but talk about it for a second.
I mean, with this report, it debunks the myth that immigration will drive down wages. Actually, it's proved that in some cases it actually even elevates wages. It brings also, it's better for the economy, it's good for goods and services, and it's good for the real estate market, it increases entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and these elements are discussed in this report. It was conducted by the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. The authors of this report include an individual who is an economist at the famous Cornell's School of Industrial Relations, and they have documented many benefits of immigration that help economic growth, innovation, entrepreneurship. I wonder whether this particular report that came out very recently, I wonder if in some ways the industry researchers were talking to each other, because this Canadian report that came out earlier this summer, in which it showed the benefits of immigration in terms of
for example, education. It's also proven that the children of immigrants do succeed more in school than those of Canadian-born parents, in the sense that there are high rates to graduate from high school and go on to university,
right,
for example.
Right.
That's one of the main topics.
One of the main, and basically this report from Canada that came out, it was in March 2016. We covered it on our website for the March news articles. But that report, called Immigration, Business Ownership, and Employment in Canada, highlights and documents how immigrants have a higher percentage of business owners than Canadians. So, which in theory would be good for the economy.
Exactly, yes.
You have immigrants who are coming to Canada and have a higher percentage of business ownership than Canadians. So you've got, as you pointed out correctly, that the children of immigrants are having higher graduation from high school rates than Canadians. You have also a study shows, so this Immigration Myths Busted, a U.S. publication, I think for the first time in such an overwhelming way, shows that no, immigration does not drive down wages necessarily. I think what really this all shows, if you calculate the costs of immigration, it has a neutral effect. There is cost in bringing people to Canada, but it's the human capital benefit that the economy will receive over a fairly long period of time. So you need immigration. From a Canadian perspective, we now have empirical evidence that shows, and there are Canadian naysayers, and I won't even ingratiate them by acknowledging who they are. They know who they are, who continually write, former government employees who left the government 30 years ago and continue to write negative commentaries on how immigration harms Canada. But the latest numbers from Canada and now from the United States are overwhelming, that there are many benefits to immigration. And really what's alarming is that the working age population in Canada is increasingly being made up by immigration.
Exactly.
And the Canadian portion of our labor market is falling steadily. And so there's this storm that's developing. Policymakers have raised alarms, and the government is listening. And what are they doing about it? I mean, they're
conducting lots of polls. They want to see the Canadians' view on immigration, and from the results of the polls, Canadians are very open-minded, especially with regards to skilled worker immigration.
So there is this third piece that we've covered on our site, and again, today's topic is a review of some really interesting developments in the immigration industry during the past 2 weeks. And we've kind of streamed this theme together during our 15 to 20 minute segment that we're going to cover today. But the third piece talks about how there are studies being done. The Canadian government is listening. And I think what they're trying to do is ensure that their policy plans do not ignore what Canadians are saying.
Exactly, yes.
And it's not going to be, it's not going to be such that all Canadians favor a massive amount of immigration. That's not what's happening.
It'd be like that with any country. I mean,
Sure.
You can't have 100% on one side, for
Right.
example.
Right.
But I mean, Canadians do favor, immigration, for example. I mean, they have an open mind, especially when, immigrants wish to integrate. They would like to learn the language, they join the workforce, they participate in community activities. I mean, Canadians have a very open-minded view on this.
They seem to have an open-minded view, and the takeaway from all of this is that the government is listening. They're putting in plans to bring in an elevated level of immigration, but it's managed immigration, so that we get all the bases covered. What are the main developments that the government plans to modify?
For example, they want to change the law so it's easier for international graduates. So once they graduate from a Canadian university, it's easier for them to remain in Canada because, they have Canadian education, Canadian qualifications, and they're ready to join the workforce. So that's one.
Right.
And there's another one in the sense of the family class. They want to make it easier for those to bring their close family members to Canada.
Right.
They want to lower the processing times because processing times in some cases can be quite high.
This has been a blemish on our immigration policies, is that family class spousal sponsorship applications in some areas of the world are taking years. And it was a difficult challenge for the former government, which really I think it got considerably worse under the former government. But the current government now has to act. It's almost 1 year since they were elected, and they have to act.
Yes.
They can't just be in favor of economic immigration. They are in favor of rectifying these unacceptable long processing times for spousal applications. And I think, we're all hopeful that they're going to do that. What people are hoping is that it's standardized across the whole geographic spectrum, not just Europe and North American processing times, but also in India, China, the Philippines, where, of course, these posts have the highest number of applications. Right. So it becomes difficult for the government to work in those areas because again, this is just insider information in terms of language and I should say knowledge, that the processing missions in those areas are challenged. And the case officers are challenged. But really what the government needs to do is give direction to process family class spousal sponsorship, no matter where you are in the world, within a certain time. It could be 12 months, it could be, in that range. And hopefully they're going to succeed. The overall indication is that Canadians seem to favor the higher levels of immigration, of managed immigration. You've mentioned correctly that they're looking to improve in the next few weeks, we're hoping to see concrete elements of these new changes that they're going to announce. Family reunification, international students.
As well as the technology sector?
Technology sector. So we have
a shortage
in many different labor markets of the country, where Canadian technology companies are forced to wait literally 6, 8, 10 months, which is untenable in the recruitment world. Immigration and recruitment go together.
Exactly.
So if you're going to have an immigration program, it's obvious that it needs to mirror what recruitment aims to achieve. I've always said that immigration minister is probably one of the, if not the biggest, one of the largest recruiters in the world.
Yeah.
The immigration minister to Canada, that is,
Yes.
bringing in so many individuals. So we have these changes. The temporary foreign worker program, they're planning to
They'll lift the limitations as well. They're trying to make changes as well with regard to that program to make it easier.
To make it easier, because again, under that former government, we had very harsh and restrictive changes that were put into place. And I think what this government is planning to do is kind of move the goalposts slightly. They're going to make it not, go the other way completely, but to temper down some of the obvious, egregious elements of the program that really do not benefit Canada overall. So, again, the provincial nominee program.
And that's already been taken into effect. I mean, so Atlantic Canada was able to actually accept more immigrants. So that's been actually raised. So, I mean, obviously, we have seen changes. We expect changes, and changes have already been put in place as well.
And hopefully some of the provinces who seem to be lobbying for more numbers, because in Canada, as we all know, the federal government is the largest player in terms of bringing in a certain number of economic immigrants. But immigration in Canada is shared between the provinces, and all the provinces have their own powers, and they all neatly blend in now to the express entry system, where provinces can nominate and how a provincial nominee receives a lot of points. So the government is looking to give some effect and give the provinces more selection of immigrants, more numbers, and we're waiting to see how that's going to play out overall. So those are the three main topics that we wanted to cover today. And perhaps we might move to take on some questions. And
Sure.
does that make sense?
Yep. So let's start with the first question.
Okay. All right.
So this one is from Trolls, and the topic is with regards to moving to Canada temporarily and what to do next. So him and his girlfriend are living in Denmark, and they both finished their master's degrees a couple years ago, and they're interested in Canada. So they're particularly interested in Vancouver because they love nature and a city with a good vibe. He runs a one-man online marketing agency and can work from anywhere in the world. So, and basically, there's three things I would like. They want to explore Canada for 6 to 8 months. He wants to be able to continue to work remotely. And, he says he has the financials to support his stay, so he's interested on what kind of visa they do need.
Okay. Without dealing with their nationality, the first thing you mentioned was they are living in Denmark?
Yes.
Okay. And they're looking to visit Canada. What comes to mind is for an extended period of time.
Yes, for 6 to 8 months.
Now we don't know their nationality. Some of these programs that we talk about allow for long-term programs, what we call international student programs, where people under the International Mobility Program can come to Canada. So depending on their nationality, they might qualify for what we will loosely call working holidays. But typically people from a number of countries do not need a temporary resident visa to enter Canada. But when you do come to Canada, I think that these individuals seem to have, again, without knowing their nationality, if they are if they're passport holders or permanent residents of a country that has an agreement with Canada, they may not need a visitor's visa, what we call loosely a visitor's visa. They may not need an entry visa. In such instance, they would be able to come and visit Canada for up to 6 months. And then once they're in Canada, typically individuals could apply for an extension or of time. You could apply inside Canada if you're from a country that doesn't need a visa formality to enter the country. You would be given 6 months, and you would be able to extend your stay in Canada. If you were interested in staying for a year, perhaps you might change your mind and want to work in Canada. We have the International Mobility Program, under which there are a number of programs based on country that are participants in this agreement. and they would be able to work for a 1-year period. But those visas go very quickly. So, and if you are from a country in which you need a temporary resident visa to visit Canada, then you would need to, of course, document what your purpose of visit is, how long you want to visit, and in such instance, you would have to prove other elements, including that you do not intend to stay permanently.
Right.
So I think, without knowing their nationality, if they're planning to visit Canada, it seems that, again, if they're from the visa-exempt country, they'll have no difficulty getting a 6-month entry. And it's not formally stamped in your passport when you come to Canada. Sometimes they'll mention must leave, and they'll put a 6-month window. If they're not, and it's not an automatic that you get 6 months. You have to have at least satisfy the examining officer that your purpose would lend itself to a 6-month window. So it requires a bit of a verification on what your nationality is, what your purpose of visit is, but for many individuals there's a lot of options.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Colin. So that brings us to the next question. It's from Macromegaly. He wants to sponsor his wife from Africa. He's a Canadian citizen and studying medicine in the United States without any income. He wants to know how he can meet the income requirements needed to sponsor his wife from Africa to Canada.
Okay. Well, listen, all these applications are done online, and you don't have an income requirement to sponsor a spouse. Of course, you want to make sure that there's no inadmissibility issues. You want to make sure that the Canadian citizen is, did you mention they're in a particular, where are they located now?
He's located in the United States and she's in Africa.
Okay. If he's located in the U.S., there's an interesting element to this fact pattern, and that is the Canadian authorities will want to be sure, because one of the conditions of sponsorship is that you intend to reside in Canada.
Yes, right.
So if you are working in the U.S. and you want to Canadianize your spouse, which is something that, of course, it's quite reasonable if you're a Canadian, and South Africa being a country in which it's very, you need a TRV to come to Canada. So to even visit Canada, you'll need to apply for a TRV. But to sponsor under the family class spousal, the Canadian citizen who's living in the States will want to show evidence that he or she, well, he is going to permanently reside in Canada.
Right.
In some areas of the world, the Middle East, for example, there's a lot of policy that's been put into place where an individual will have to actually show that they're leaving their job.
Yes.
And that they're tying up their anchor. They're breaking their anchor, let's say in the Middle East. I don't think the U.S., the Canadian counterparts are going to be that harsh with someone who's in the U.S., but it wouldn't surprise me. And so therefore, it's important that you have evidence that you're going to live in Canada, and that's the main takeaway. And income is not an element of assessment. So if you don't have the income to sponsor, that is not a bar in itself.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So just moving on to the third question, that is from Canadiga. It's regarding the financial documents for a visitor's visa. So he's applying for a visitor's visa for his grandmother. He submitted a letter of invitation to her that she can submit with her application. He wants to know how he can send his financial documents to support her application directly to the visa office. The reason being that he does not want to disclose his financial information to anyone except for CIC, the Canadian government, and his grandmother is elderly.
Okay. Well, most of these applications are now done online. So when you make your application, you're submitting them directly to the assessment center, and it's done online. So you don't have to worry about how it will be submitted and such. But it's not, you can't expect to get this documentation back. So you want to be sure before you submit this documentation when it comes you you're not really, the issue of receiving your documents back, it doesn't come into play, and in terms of who's going to know is really not an issue, because you're really dealing and transacting with the Canadian authorities online only.
Perfect. And okay, so we have time for one more question. It's from Mauricio35. He says, I am in the process of finding an employer to obtain an LMIA worth 600 points. I'm afraid, as in order to get the LMI approval, it needs to be proven that no Canadians are available to fill the position. Could you please explain?
Okay, well that's an interesting question, and that is, it goes to a number of things. First of all, if you want to work in Canada on a work permit to work for a Canadian employer, you need what's known as a labor market impact assessment. And if you're applying for immigration on a permanent basis to Canada, under the express entry system, we all know that getting an employer lined up and suited to sponsor your application and obtaining a labor market impact assessment, an approved one, brings an additional 600 points to the overall picture. And this individual raises an interesting concept in that one of the elements is that the employer must prove that they have canvassed the labor market. And the test is not that no Canadians are available. The test is that the employer cannot find any Canadians. Yeah. And that's an important nuance, because the labor market in Canada is so fragmented. There are so many labor markets. And so what the Canadian authorities do is they ensure that an employer has advertised the position. Right. It's disclosing the title, the salary, all the working conditions, and that this advertising process is for a significant period of time. It was 2 months. 1 month probably is where the new rules might come down to. Depends on the type of occupation that we're trying to fill. But the test is not that no Canadians are available. It's that the employer cannot locate a Canadian. Now, the wages that must be advertised does not compel an employer to pay the highest wages possible.
Exactly.
It has to be a wage that's within the range of normal wages. So let's take a position where if a Canadian, an average wage for a particular position, perhaps a Canadian may not be available, but it doesn't compel the employer to pay the maximum wage. We don't have to have a bidding war where it drives up wages and then there'll be a Canadian available. What really the employer must do is advertise, and it's very conceivable that yes, there may be Canadians available, but at that particular snapshot in time, the employer cannot locate suitable Canadians, and the word suitable means who are willing to take the job at the reasonable salary that's being offered. Right. So, the labor market is a very dynamic one. And at any given time, there are people who may be available, who may not be available. But the employer, again, the test is not, because it sounds like a scary test to an outsider, that an employer is, well, there's lots of Canadians available. I mean, we do have an unemployment rate of 7%, but in some areas of the country, the unemployment rate is 4.2%. Depends on the occupation and sub-labor markets. And I'm not talking about necessarily the farthest reaches of the country. So this LMIA, that's very important, and that some of our clients are receiving through our own efforts because of the services we offer under the Express Entry, is because all of our clients do receive excellent employment search consulting assistance. All of our clients receive that. So the test that we work with employers, and we allow them to understand, and we help them understand, is that you don't have to go into a bidding war. And it's very conceivable that on the one hand there may be Canadians available, but at that particular moment in time, there aren't Canadians to fill this position that's being advertised. And that becomes a much more reasonable standard, yes, and more plausible in the face of a 7% unemployment rate across the country. But again, each sub-labor market has its own challenges.
Right.
So I think that would be how I would approach that particular.
No, I agree. So I guess that, we've covered our topics
Okay.
For today. So I guess that concludes our live stream for today. Thank you very much for joining us.
So we have now covered our fourth live stream.
Yes.
The information that we shared is where it's on our
Yeah,
website.
it can be found on the news section of our website, immigration.ca.
And how can people reach us for future?
So if you're interested in assessing your eligibility for immigration to Canada, please go to our website and click on the free online assessment link. So we'll review your qualifications and we'll get back to you in 1 to 2 working days.
Okay. Social media?
Social media, please feel free to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. If you have any friends that you find might be interested in watching the live stream, please also do share it with them. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much joining us today, and we look forward to sharing with you on our next session, which will probably be in 2 to 3 weeks' time. So stay tuned and have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.